Father, I just thank you that you love us so deeply, Lord. And like Darren said, you know everything about us, everything, Lord. Even before a word comes out of our mouth, Lord, you know what it is we're going to say, you know, the reasons why we do the things we do, Lord. But yet you still love us. You love us so deeply, Jesus, and I thank you so much for that. Lord, I just pray that your word will go forth, Lord, in the experience that I'm about to share. And Jesus, I just thank you for all that you do for each one of us here. We might be at all different stages, Lord, of our journey, but as long as we're on that journey together with you, Jesus, that's all that matters. And Lord, I thank you for everybody that's here today. And Lord, I pray that you'll just seal this building and keep the enemy away, Lord, so that he can't interfere or hear, Lord. And I ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Well, good morning, everybody. He's putting me off, actually. I'll just put it there. It seems a long time since I've seen everybody from this perspective. It's been quite a long time, actually, and a lot's happened since the last time I spoke. I'm glad I'm in a different place from the last time I spoke. When we think about journeys and things like that, you know, we plan from A to B, don't we? But we don't know quite how A to B is going to go. We hope it's going to be smooth. We hope there's not going to be any, you know, bad traffic and big potholes and all of the things that we know that can hinder a journey. Many things can hinder a journey, can't they? And we hope, you know, we don't see those things. But the reality of a journey is that it might take a little bit longer than you thought. You might need one or two more rest stops. You might need to pull over occasionally. And, you know, that's all part and parcel of a journey. But the journey with God is a journey where he's got to be the one that actually is in the driving seat. Now, that does not mean that it doesn't require effort from us. Because it does. Not an effort where it's all, you know, it's like you're trying to muster every bit of strength up from within yourself, but effort from the point of view of he's the one that's leading, he's the one that's directing, he's the one that's helping, he's the one that's providing. You're the one that's just got to cooperate. Now, Darren's been talking, particularly last week, and we've had some great messages. Well, I say recently. I mean, we've had great messages all the time, but recently, you know, Darren was talking about, particularly last week, Darren was talking about the podcast of life. And I hope you were all here last week. If you weren't, then it's available on YouTube. I still think it's available on YouTube, Darren. Yes, good. So I encourage you to watch it. If you haven't watched it, I do encourage you to watch it because it is an eye-opener in many ways. And Darren was talking about, you know, Sam, you have this podcast, and you invited Father to join into podcast, and the podcast took a little bit longer than maybe you expected, I don't know. But in that, it was like, you know, Darren started to talk about all sorts of things, you know, ups and downs, and etc. And the reality of life is it is a little bit like that, you know, a podcast, where, you know, things may have tried to define you, but when you come to God, he begins to redefine you as to who you really are. That is a precious thing, a precious, precious thing. And it reminded me of a few weeks ago, when Darren, we went around to see Darren and Carol, but God had really impressed on my heart a picture. You know I work in pictures. Anybody that knows me knows that I work in pictures. And it was a picture of a Rubik's Cube. Now, hands up, everybody, if you know what a Rubik's Cube is. You youngsters probably don't. I don't know. Mind you, actually, I think we've got a full house. What about you at the back? Good. So everybody knows what a Rubik's Cube is. I never had one as a child. I never really saw the point of it. Not because I didn't want one. I just thought, what a waste of time. You know, some people were doing it fast, some people were doing it slow. But Josh, were you good at it, Josh? What was your record? 34 seconds? Show off. It says in the Bible about not thinking too highly of than you ought to think. God can do it faster. So why am I telling you about this Rubik's Cube? Well, so this Rubik's Cube represented my life. Now, when I'm born, Now, just go with me for this, because I'm not too sure exactly, because God hasn't told me, because I don't know the exact things. But when I was born, I imagined this Rubik's Cube to be fully formed, to have all the colours on each side, forming that Rubik's Cube. And wouldn't it be great if life just stayed like that? Where you didn't have to untangle stuff or get in a tangle. But what I found, what happened to me, was life I didn't know what was going to hit me. I was only a kid. Things started to happen. Like we've been on a journey about how things can define you, can't they? Well, things certainly did define me as a kid. And brought up really well by great parents. But that doesn't mean to say you're not going to get knocked. That doesn't mean to say things aren't going to happen, or somebody's not going to say something, or this situation is going to change something within you, and you're going to believe something different, or it's going to throw a layer over your heart, and you're going to be hard, or whatever. Life has its challenges, like I said before. Now, what I found with this Rubik's Cube was that everything goes hunky-dory for a while, and all of a sudden, bang, something happens, and what's that all about? Why did he say that? And then, in your little Rubik's Cube, whoops, there's a little twist, right? And so something's slightly out of place already. And then you might dwell on that, and then you might believe in something like that, so you sow a seed. And then something else happens. It could be anything. It could be something happened at school, or something happens with health, or something happens, I don't know, just in general. All sorts of things can happen, can't they? And bang, there we go. And there's another one. And then you look at it and you think, oh, this isn't right, and that doesn't look right. Things seem different. And then maybe you try and tinker around with it and try and get it right again, but you just make that bit worse. And then before you know it, right, because of knockbacks, because of things people say, because of things that you believe, stuff that not necessarily God even never intended to happen to you, these things, all of a sudden, your life just, when you look at how a Rubik's Cube is supposed to look, it's like, hang on a second, where's all the colours gone? They're all a jumble. They're not together. The sides aren't there. Do you see what I'm saying? How life for me was a bit like that. And so when I got a knock back, there was a twist. I might try and fix it, but I couldn't fix it. I didn't know how to fix it. So I twisted it some more, and before I knew it, it was just a mess, just a tangled mess. Hands up if anybody can identify with that. Some of you might not, some of you can't, some of you might not, I don't know. I can only speak from my own experience here. And so a lot of these things and a lot of these knockbacks can also give you a false impression of who God is. They can. Maybe these things make you fearful. Maybe these things have made you fearful of stepping out in situations and things like that. I know that's the case for some people in here. But these knockbacks, these things, they hold you in almost like a prison, don't they? And it's just one of those horrible things. But, okay, and I'm just talking about my own life, my own Rubik's Cube. I thought life was still going okay, but what I realized, I was so blinded, I couldn't even see that my life wasn't even going okay. And then I met Lisa. Lisa was a Christian. She showed me different things, and I said, okay, I'm just gonna see who God is, because the perception I had of God, based on my experience of life, based on the experience of how my Rubik's Cube got all messed up, was that maybe God's harsh, or maybe God's not really that interested in me. Otherwise, why would these things have happened? All of those things can go through your mind. But you know what? Those things, that false impression can trap you. I don't know, maybe there's somebody here just about to start or is just sort of just finding out about God. Well, good, I'm glad you are. Because what we've got to do in that situation is let God be God. And what you have to do in that situation is say, hang on a second, this false impression, I've got to lay that to one side, because what if God really is who he says he is? Well, how are you going to know if God is really is who he says he is unless you invest, unless you try, unless you find and try and, seek him in those moments. Well, I found that God actually wasn't that hard to find. He wasn't. But the knockbacks of this Rubik's Cube did interfere with my relationship with God. Because all of those things, up to that point, I was defined by all of those things, and I was coming to God defined by who I thought I was. And then God says, hold on, we've got a journey to go here, and it's not, you're just not going to know the end from the beginning straight away. But what God started to do in me was unravel some of those things. When I finally stopped keeping hold of that Rubik's Cube and being in charge of that Rubik's Cube and saying, well, I'll try and fix it. When I handed it over, it was like a weight comes off you. And then God says, to quote Sam, I've got moves. I have got moves. You think Josh can do it in 30 seconds? Well, God can do it instantly. And I loved what you said, Sam, about that chessboard analogy. But the fact is that God's got moves, all sorts of moves that he can play in your life. It's not when you hand that Rubik's Cube over to God, God doesn't say, never seen it this bad before. Not quite sure how I'm going to get this one sorted out. Thankfully, God knows everything, the beginning from the end, the reason why we did stuff. He knew all of those things. He knew exactly, before I even came to Jesus, he knew exactly what my Rubik's Cube was going to look like. Now, that can stop you from progressing, or it can say, hang on a second, here we are, Lord. You do whatever you want to do with my life. And then God says, oh, thank you, because I need to be in control of it. And then, because God's got moves, he moves. And he does things, and he starts to slowly unravel. Now, Darren mentioned the other week about, how we throw some things down and pick some things up. Those, like Darren was mentioning, those things are stones with things with names on it. And, some of the names on those stones of the things that might have defined you in the past. And yeah, you are to throw those things down. But what about some of the names that God was going to define you with? And maybe you threw some of them down at the same time. I'm not trying to repeat Darren's sermon. What I am saying is that can sort of happen, can't it? And so as God starts to repair your Rubik's Cube, it might be that here you pick a stone up here, you pick a stone up there, but that doesn't mean to say that you're not going to get more knocks. It doesn't. It just means that I'd rather get knocks with God holding my Rubik's Cube than get knocks with me holding the Rubik's Cube, because my experience of every time I got a knock was me trying to repair it myself, made the whole situation worse. I hope you're with me on what I'm trying to say here now. Now, so in my early Christian journey, it was more about just finding out who God was. And what I realized was he wasn't that person. And I'm sure that's the case for many of you, that he wasn't that person who I thought he was. And my relationship started to grow with God. And he started unraveling things. And I slowly but surely began to realize that, serving is a big part of what God's asking me to do. Serving. We're servants. We're here for his purpose, for his glory, to bring him glory. Did I know the first thing about serving? No. Did I let those knockbacks stop me from serving? Maybe, to a degree. The point is that God, in whatever area of your life you are on, there's a reason and a purpose for every step. And serving, you'll find, is a thread all the way through it. All the way through it. Now, some of you might be thinking, there may be some people here today, and I'm not trying to just quote Darren, but it does show that I've been listening. Right? Maybe there's some people here today who've got this bad impression, or this horrible impression of God, and it's not quite right, wants to find out, but there's something stopping. I encourage you to just dive in, because he is not a God that's hard to find. He isn't. Your perception just needs to go and let his truth, his real perception, who he really is, shine through. And then when you get that, you change. You start to change. As I know many of you have experienced, you start to change. And God is going to start doing new things in you. Now look, there's things that you've thrown away and there's things that you need to pick up all the way through this journey. And God knows exactly what it is that you need to pick up and what you do need to throw away. But serving is a key thing all the way through. Look at the parable of the talents. What is that all about? Matthew 25, I think it is, verse 14. It's all about the abilities. It wasn't about the money. I mean, that parable was just a parable about investing money in that sense, right? But it was deeper than that, because what it really means is that everybody was given that sum according to, and this is really important, their abilities. Well, where did you get your abilities from? Did they suddenly, in that Rubik's Cube, were you trying to be somebody else and you made it worse? Were you trying to do something that you didn't have the ability on and make it worse? God knows everything about you. He knows everything that's going to make you tick. He knows who He wants you to be, and He knows the abilities that's going to get you there. So He gives us things according to our ability. And so those abilities are God-given abilities. Now, maybe you're in a position where I know people talk about these things, but I don't know where to serve. I don't know how to serve. Well, look, there's so many different ways you can serve. Just ask people, right? You've got hands, use them. You've got feet, use them. You've got eyes to see things. You've got ears to hear. Do something with them. Help, love, care, encourage. There's so many different things that you could be doing. All the while you're thinking, well, what's my purpose? Well, start off with those things. There may be some things that you've thrown away in the past because of knocks that have changed who God originally created you to be into this person that you don't think you are, but God will cause you to pick those things up as part of this journey. He will. Why? Because of His love for you. And that's what I found, that He wants you to serve. So try and find those areas where you can serve. Because I know there's some people in here still thinking, even now, don't quite know where I fit. Don't quite know how to serve. Just open your eyes and see. Let God lead and direct you. The person next to you, the people in church, you are a blessing and a benefit to them. Why? Because God's already given you those God-given abilities that you might not even be aware of yet, but you can do that. But here's what I found as well, all right? Whilst God also was in the process of building me, or rebuilding me, and putting those colours in the right places, there were still knockbacks. There were still things that happen in this life, because we're in a race, and that race isn't necessarily a smooth journey. It's like I'm saying about that journey isn't necessarily from A to B, isn't necessarily going to be without hazards. And I found that, some knocks really did hurt, and some knocks, and we found this out, or we did, Lisa and I for sure found this out in the latter half of last year, where yes, as a Christian, I've grown a lot. But there was ups and downs and there was issues, and God's helped me all the way through it. But then I came to like a brick wall. Like something happened and it was like, what? How am I going to scale that? And what happened was, I just said, okay, God, give me my Rubik's Cube back. I'll try and sort this out. And it was like, there was no way that was going to happen to me. No chance was I ever going to fix it. And I've found that this is something else that can happen in that journey. You can hide. You can hide. There's some people here hiding. There's some people here hiding. And that's obviously on God's mind because of some of the things Darren's already mentioned this morning. There are some of you that are hiding. Now look, one of the things I've found with hiding from experience, recent experience, is that when you hide from God, you take your abilities also with you, and so can't be used for God. Does that make sense? You take them with you. And when you're hiding, you remember the parable of the talents. What was the first servant doing? He just hid from God. I can't. What, you're expecting too much from me? I think you are harsh. I'm not saying that anybody here thinks I'm harsh, but what I am saying is that sometimes we can hide. Sometimes we can bury. Sometimes we can just. One of the biggest things is bury this in the ground, in the sand. And I have found that my Christian life has not just been plain sailing. There has been times of that, but then there's been rocky patches that have stumbled me, but I've managed to get over in the Lord. But this one was like a dark, dark storm, like a dark place for both of us. I know it has been for many people, and I know Darren's already spoken about it. But the point of what I'm getting to is that I didn't handle it in the right way. I tried to pick up my own Rubik's Cube and mess around with it and look at it and thinking, God, well, why is it worse? Well, because I took it. Well, why did you let me take it, Lord? Because I'm a good God and I love you. Sometimes you need to go through things yourself because I'm going to make things good out of a bad situation. And he did. But what I found was how easy it was actually to hide. Faced with those situations, faced with, this is the storm of all storms. Look at Paul's life. Was Paul's life plain sailing? No, it wasn't. He suffered shipwrecks. He suffered beatings. He suffered imprisonment. Did all those things make him say, oh, Lord, my life's just an absolute mess. What are you doing to me? No, he persevered through. He knew what he was doing in God because God was in charge of him and he knew exactly what was happening in those situations. Sometimes he looked at those situations and thought, why? He must have wondered why. All sorts of things might have gone through his mind. But he carried on and was steadfast, and he never hid. I don't think he hid. Correct me if I'm wrong, Darren. I can't recall any moment where Paul actually hid. But I can recall moments where I have. And I hid for quite a while. I think we both did, didn't we, darling? We hid for quite a while. When you're hiding from God, that's not a good place to be. Now, there can be a time in your Christian walk where there's a time to hide. But that's hiding under the shadow of his wing, where you might need encouragement, restoration, care, recovery, all of those things, which is really important. Because even during those things, you can still serve. Even under the stress of that, you can still serve. But the moment you take your eyes off God, the moment you bury your head in the sand, the moment you say, that's it, I'm hiding, then you're hiding everything. Everything it's given you, everything it's doing with it, you're hiding the lot. You can't just partially hide. But God is also gracious enough to say, where are you, David? Where are you? Who said to go in there? What are you doing? Maybe with a little help from Darren as well. But what? And we think God's going to be that hard taskmaster. Well, get my words out. You may think that God's going to be hard on you coming out of that. God knew you were going to go in it. So he surely knows when you're going to come out of it, and he's there. And he's going to talk to you if you'll listen in those situations. And he'll take you through. And that's sort of where I was. I'm not in that place now. I'm not afraid anymore of the things that happened in those situations. And God's got my Rubik's Cube. And he's starting to just say, Dave, I've got moves. I've got moves. Even though you put yourself in there, I've got moves to get you out. Even though you don't know what's coming in the future, when there are knockbacks, I've still got moves for you. Even though we've set sail as ECC on calm seas and beautiful sunny skies, doesn't mean to say there's not going to be some little rough patches where he's going to say, don't hide, I've got you. Just let me keep your Rubik's Cube. I hope that has made some sense to some people here today. That hiding in God is not a good place to be. hiding from God. Is that what I said? No, sorry. I meant to say hiding from God is not a good place to be. Hiding in God and with God sometimes can be the perfect place to be. And some of you need to hear that this morning. Don't know why, but some of you do. And that's where I'm going to end. I'm not sure how long I've spoken for, 15 minutes maybe. And my gorgeous wife is going to carry on.
Yeah, just wanted to share a little bit of what God's been, obviously David shared some of what we've been going through, but just from my experience really. We've both been through a bit of a challenging season, as many people have, but just how God has ministered, the constancy of his love and his care and his compassion throughout that time. And even when we've wavered or wobbled or wondered what kind of good could come out of it, he never left in that time. And also, obviously, we've had a lot of encouragement. We've been round at Darren and Carol's, and they've, the constancy of that care and that compassion, knowing when to care and also when to coax you out of that darkness. And also some good friends who've also sat when I was in that hole and just listened to me. We have both been hiding from people, but also at times from the Lord. Different reasons. They vary from fear or despondency or just pain or generally sometimes just whatever life throws at you. And the Lord's been showing me examples of when it was all right to hide, and he actually hid people. The two examples that I'd read over Christmas were of when Zachariah and Elizabeth had this miraculous, she was barren, and the angel appeared and said that his wife was going to be pregnant, and she immediately secluded herself for 5 months entirely. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be lovely just to seclude yourself from 5 months? But it was different to how I wanted to seclude myself. She wanted to seclude herself entirely and be with the Lord and ponder this amazing, miraculous, pregnancy that she was experiencing after years and years and years of trying for a baby. And so for 5 months she hid herself. And then after that period had finished, just 4 weeks later, the same angel Gabriel appeared to a young girl, Mary, who was a relative of Elizabeth's. And her response, after being told that she was going to become pregnant by the power of the Holy Spirit and get to carry the Son of God, she went and hid, actually, at Elizabeth's, which is quite funny, for 3 months and just hid herself. But again, it was a beautiful time. She was with the Lord. She was singing and magnifying God of all that he'd done. And then I was also reading in Elijah, where, that's in 1 Kings, by the way, where Elijah, he amazing prophet of God that... there'd been a succession, Israel had had a succession of evil kings and God's people had wandered away, and Elijah was bold and he was fiery, and he'd gone up to the king and told the king that God had said there was going to be no rain for 3 years, which would cause a terrible drought and famine. And after Elijah had, in obedience, given that message, God told him to go and hide. He said, go and hide. I want you to go and hide down by the brook, and you can drink from the brook, and I'm going to feed you miraculously. The birds are going to bring you things to eat every day. And Elijah had this close, intimate relationship with God. He heard God's voice, but now it was time to go and hide. And then the brook dried up because there was no rain. After a while, time went by. Then God gives him further instructions. He said, I want you to go to Zarephath, I think that's how you pronounce it. And I've told a widow there she's to look after you and provide for you. So he goes off to find this widow, and she literally has a tiny bit, because of this drought and this famine, she has a tiny bit of flour and a tiny bit of oil. And he said, please give me something to eat. And she says, I've only got this one meal left for my son and I. She said, and then that's it. We're totally destitute. There was no way for her that she and her son were going to survive. And Elijah said, God said, if you will just make me something to eat, that flour and that oil will never run out until the rain came. And because God had moved in her, she said, right, so we moved in, and they fed from this miraculous tiny, tiny portion for days and days and days. And then sadly, this woman's son got sick and died in the house when Elijah was there, and he was absolutely heartbroken, and he was crying out to God. The widow was not particularly happy with Elijah, but Elijah was crying out to God and took this child and cried out to God, please, please don't do this to this widow. Please let this little boy's soul come back to him. And God did that. He breathed life into this child, and this child came alive. And then Elijah, all kinds of amazing things happen. Elijah has to go back to the king and there's all these other miracles as well about the bull and the sacrifice. If you haven't read it, go to 1 Kings 17. It's absolutely awesome. Elijah is hearing God's voice, and God is doing amazing, amazing, mighty miracles through Elijah. And anyway, then he goes to the king and says, the rain is coming, even though there's no sign, no clouds or anything. The rain is coming. And so, I think his servant goes and looks for rain, and Elijah's speaking this word out in faith, and he goes to the sea. No sign. Goes to Elijah. No, that's absolutely no sign of it. But Elijah keeps saying, go back, go back, go back. And on the 7th time, the servant must have absolutely been exhausted. I don't know how far it was. And he said, I've seen a tiny cloud. And Elijah's all really excited. And suddenly the sky goes black and the rain begins to fall. And then King Ahab goes back to the queen and tells him everything that Elijah's done, all these miracles. And she's furious. And she sends a message back to Elijah and she says, by this time tomorrow, I will have killed you. I'm going to take your life. And this amazing man of God, talk about your life not being defined in moments. He's terrified. He runs away now from God and from everybody, and he hides. He's like, oh my word, she's going to kill me. And he's absolutely terrified, not under the instruction, takes his eyes off the Lord and just hides himself away. He is down, he is depressed, he is finished, and he sits under this tree and he said, that is it. I have had enough. He said, just let me die. He's having a proper right moan. I don't know if you've ever done that. And it's like, God is so gracious. God knew that he would get to this point of feeling tired, feeling exhausted, feeling burnt out. And God was still there. He never left Elijah, even though Elijah had seen God move in his life. He just got to the point of complete burnout. I would say probably is depressed. And God continues to minister this care to Elijah. And God also sends this angel he just lies down totally, exhausted, depressed, goes to sleep. God sends this angel, again, that care and that compassion. And this angel wakes him up and he says, come on, you've got a journey. You've not finished this journey. There's still work to do. Get up, have something to eat and have this water. And Elijah just, goes back to sleep. And this happens a few times. In the end, God doesn't leave him in that pit where he's gone, in this place where he's gone to hide. And so eventually he gets up and God wants him to go to Mount Horeb and he finds this cave and he goes back into hiding and he's like, he just doesn't want to face this situation. And then God sends this wind first, doesn't he? This almighty wind so strong that it rips the rocks in two, and then he sends this almighty earthquake, and then he sends this fire. And God was saying, I wasn't in the wind, and he was demonstrating his power, but he said, I wasn't in the wind, and I wasn't in the earthquake, and I wasn't in the fire. And then it makes me cry this bit, sorry. And then there's this gentle stillness. And Elijah hears this still, small voice, even hiding away in this cave. And this is a voice that he knows, this is a voice that he recognizes. And God pulls him out of this cave by that beautiful, still, small voice that God is, even though Elijah has failed, God's still there whispering in his name. And that's what draws him out of this cave. That's what draws him out of this place where he's hidden. And God says, come on, you've still got a job to do. This is not over. So talk about a life that's not defined in a moment. And then finally, the Lord had spoken to me through Joshua. He said, just read the book of Joshua, and my hearing isn't quite tuned in to know whereabouts to read. So I just started at the beginning, and the first 4 verses in, I'm just like, oh my goodness. It's just amazing. Moses had died, obviously. God's people had been delivered out of slavery by the hand of Moses, and they'd been wandered in the wilderness, and then Moses had died, and God had said to Joshua, I want you to arise. I want you to get up. I want you to take his place, meaning you have got a job to do. And God had said, I will not fail. I will be with you. I will not fail you. I will not forsake you. I will not leave you. He said, but I want you to be strong and I want you to be courageous. And God was giving him these instructions. Joshua hadn't even yet fulfilled anything. And God was saying, I'm going to be with you. I'll not leave you. I'll not forsake you. He said, but I want you to be strong. I want you to be courageous. He says it twice actually. Then Joshua goes to the people and says, oh my goodness, this is the instruction, this is what we've got to do. We've got a promised land to get to. We can't keep wandering about in the desert. God's plan hadn't changed, even though this was a new chapter, a new page, a new kind of era really for the Israelites. But there were still going to be battles to face. And then the people said to Joshua, right, we're with you, but Joshua, you're going to need to be strong. You're going to need to. So don't forget to encourage your leader either, because the people then repeated, even though they hadn't heard God say that to Joshua, the people then said that, be strong, be courageous, and we're going to do this. And so the Lord was just saying to me, just hearing that whisper in that time where we were hiding, just hearing that whisper, that still small voice of God calling our names and saying, even though you feel like it's done, even though you feel washed up and, you want to give up, God was whispering our names, drawing us out of that cave. So, I don't know where everybody is at quite, this is just kind of our honest admission of where we've been at, and maybe we've hurt some of you by hiding, and I'm sure you're all aware, like, where's David and Lisa? Where have they gone? They've just seemed to have fallen off the face of the earth. And I know we haven't been there for people in the way that God wanted us, because we were actually hiding quite. It's funny, because this message is about hiding, and I wanted to hide this morning and not actually do it. Slightly ironic. But just in that time, we've been encouraged, haven't we, to find out who God is. And in that, you find out who you are. And all I can say is, in that time of pain, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's everything, we have found a God who is gentle, who is compassionate, who is beautiful, who doesn't give up, even though he knows the mistakes you're going to make. And he's like, come on, get up, the journey isn't done. So wherever you're at on that journey, I would just encourage you to do what the Lord's been telling Darren to encourage us to do, is find out who God is. You will find out he is more beautiful than you've ever imagined. He is more gentle. What did you say, Damacy, at house group? He is gentle and lowly, and we talked about God's character and his compassion. So I just want to leave you with that yes, it is the 1st of February, but we're still fairly early on in this new year, this new chapter, this new page that God has turned over. So I just want to finish with a song, and I have drove my family slightly mad with this song, and I just want you to listen to it and just let the Lord minister to you through it. It's called Lord, I Am Tired, but it's how this person, even in that place, doesn't give up. They're absolutely determined. They're going to continue to trust, continue to believe, because they're absolutely sure that even in that place of weakness, it's God's grace that is going to carry them through. So is it all right if we just listen to this? Thank you.
Every label, worn every doubt. I've let whispers define what I'm living without. Every scar tells a story I try to erase, and my mirror reflects the mess that I face. In the echo of failure, the weight of my shame, Jesus calls me by purpose, defined by his name. When the world says I'm finished, you say begin. When I'm at my weakest, that's where you step in. Lord, you speak louder than a broken heart. Through every tear, through the falling apart, I'm done believing the lies in my head. I am who you say I am, not what they said. I'm listening now, I'm laying it down, no longer on quicksand, but you're solid ground. I don't have to carry this fear anymore. Every error I bring, you justify me some more. Not more striving, not more pretending, just a heart that's open to your grace unending. In the middle of questions I don't understand, you're shaping my life towards the promised land. When my strength is gone and I've lost my way, you remind my heart that you're still the same. Lord, you speak louder than a broken heart. Through every tear, through the falling apart, I'm done believing the lies in my head. I am who you say I am, not what they said. I'm listening now, I'm laying it down, no longer on quicksand, but you're solid ground. You don't waste a wound, you don't miss a tear. No more silent nights, now I sense you are near. What was meant for harm, you're turning to good. You're rewriting my story like only you could. Lord, you speak louder than a broken heart. Through every tear, through the falling apart, I'm done believing the lies in my head. I am who you say I am, not what they said. I'm listening now, I'm laying it down, no longer on quicksand, but you're solid ground. Here I am, and this is my prayer. If you're speaking to weakness, then speak right here.